Hello and welcome to the Asian Game. I'm your host, Paul Williams, in Adelaide, back for 2025. A little earlier than planned, but after the news of the day, we simply had to get off our sunbeds, at least down here in Australia where it's summer, get the microphone and headphones out and get back to business, because a shockwave was sent across Asian football today with confirmation that Indonesia have sensationally sacked Shin Tae-yong, despite Tim Garuda coming off one of their biggest results in November, a 2-0 win at home against Saudi Arabia that has them sitting third in World Cup qualifying and still with a reasonable chance of qualifying for the first time ever since gaining their independence. So how and why did Erick Thohir and the PSSI come to this decision, and where to next for Indonesia with the resumption of qualifying just over 2 months away? To help me dissect it all, I'm joined by my regular co-host, Michael Church. Happy New Year to you, Michael. 6 days into the new year, and we have our first bombshell. There's never a dull moment in Asian football.
No, not at all. Happy New Year to you too, Paul. And yeah, it's not come as a massive surprise in some respects, and is a little bit of a surprise in others. But yes, it's, as you say, it's never a dull moment. And as we've already seen during this third round of qualifying for the World Cup for Asia, we've already had a number of coaching casualties, and we've had another one today.
Not the first. Will he be the last? Let's wait and see. Also joining us, I'm delighted to say, is one of Indonesia's leading journalists, Firzie Idris from Kompas, who is at PSSI headquarters in Jakarta today and has been trying to make sense of it all ever since. Firzie, great to have you back on the show. Thanks for joining us on what has been such a crazy day in Indonesian football.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Hi, Paul. Hi, Michael. Nice to chat with you guys again. Crazy day for Indonesian football. Maybe, yeah, one of the bombshell of the last few years. In the last 10 years, maybe like the biggest appointment in our national team history. But yeah, let's talk with us, and maybe guys can help make sense of it all with me.
We'll see how we go with all of that. Before we jump in, I think it's worth looking back and acknowledging the job that Shin Tae-yong has done in his time with Indonesia. When he took over in 2019, they were 173rd in the FIFA rankings, whatever you think of the FIFA rankings. They're now 127th. So that's a significant jump in 5 years' time. Before he was appointed, they'd failed to make it out of the group stage of the ASEAN Championships in 3 of the previous 4 editions. He took them to the final in his first attempt. He qualified them for the Asian Cup for the first time since they hosted it in 2007, and the first time on merit since 2004. And not only that, they made the knockout rounds where they came up short against Australia, but not without throwing a punch or two along the way. He took the under-23 squad, largely made up of local players, to the very brink of the Olympics. He's taken them to the final stage of World Cup qualifying for the first time and has them on the brink of qualification, either directly for the 2026 World Cup or at least into the next round where they'll get another shot. So whichever way you slice it, he's done a phenomenal job since he took over, considering the state that Indonesian football had been in the previous decade as well. And the fact he lasted 5 years is phenomenal as well. Makes him one of the longest serving managers they've had in their history. And I was just having a look before we came on air. In the previous 5 years before Shin, if you count their interim managers, they went through 9 managers in 5 years before Shin took over. So he also brought a sense of stability to Indonesian football and to the national team as well. So I'll come to you first, Firzie, after laying that context out in front of you. As I said off the top, it sent shockwaves around Asia. Given all of that, how has Erick Thohir and the PSSI come to this decision, and what exactly was it that they said and announced today?
Yeah, I think when he was announced, Shin, when he first came in, it's a different world from now. I think his first 1.5 years, his first 2 years, he has to cope with the pandemic. He has to cope with the lack of football in the region. He cannot scout players. The challenges kept coming and coming for him in the pandemic, especially when he caught COVID himself. Yeah, there's a bit of dynamics in there also. But then, yeah, as you say, all our achievements, all of the Indonesian national team achievements in the past years, is all because of him. He is for sure definitely one of the best coaches that we have. He accelerated the team with his training, with his methods, with his knowledge of football. Before this, we never had a coach with prior experience in the World Cup before. So him coming in after leading Korea to that famous win against Germany in 2018, and the fact that he gave his experience to all our local players, that chance of fighting against the best, as you say, in the Asian Cup in early 2024, and then again within one win of going to the Olympics. That is a reputation enhancing performance from the national team. And yeah, we go straight up to the FIFA rankings, but yeah, there's always a but in this kind of situation. The last years, the last year actually, this is a different national team than what we know. Michael already said it with me. That we talked about it when he went to Jakarta. The fact that this team, like every window, there's always new players. There's always new diaspora players. There's always new European players. By my count, I think at least there's 9 new players between the end of the Asian Cup in 2023 and the turn of this year. This is a completely different team dynamic than the one that Shin handled for his first 3 or 4 years. And when the reason given by Erick Thohir today, when he said that communication, the dynamic in the team has changed, it is because with the new European players, with the influx of our players that's playing in Europe. In Yeah, some of them maybe they're not first team players, but a few of them they play in the Champions League, in the Europa League. Yeah, when we saw that, and yeah, with the team as it is, I think Eric made a calculated gamble. This is a gamble, whichever way you say it, because the team is on the right path. Well, not exactly on the right path, but it is going there in World Cup qualifiers. But yeah, with our we cannot slip again in the last 4 matches, especially not against Bahrain and China. So yeah, this is a very calculated gamble, but the one he's willing to take to make Indonesia go to the World Cup, our first since 1938.
Mm. I'll come to you in a second, Michael. I just want to ask one more question to you, Firzie. You mentioned the comments that Erick Thohir made today. There was one particular comment that I think has caught everyone's attention when he spoke about them wanting a new leader who can implement the strategies that are agreed upon by the players, which is not normally how a national team operates. Are we to take that at its most literal, that the players lead the way and have all the power, or is that perhaps lost in translation a little bit? Can you perhaps add some context around that?
Yeah, I think it's not that far from the literal translation from Indonesian to English. It is what it is with the player powers that with the player power that we have, with the European players leading the way. I think the dynamic is very different now between the coaches and the players. As we know, coaching himself, he cannot speak English. He needs to speak English through a translator. He has 2 translators in the team. He has an English translator who cannot speak Indonesian, and an Indonesian translator who cannot speak English. So there's too many languages coming around in the team right now. And yeah, the players that come in, they are big characters. I can tell you. I talked directly to Jai Itzes. I talked to Martin. I talked to Justin, Nathan, and everyone. They are all big characters. I think with this kind of players, yeah, and you also need a little advancement in class. I think you need something more in the dugout, because yeah, I talked to Steve Hahn, the goal journalist in South Korea when Shin first arrived, and he said that one of the weaknesses of Coach Shin during his reign at the Korean national team is the European-based players. They thought that Shin's methods are a little outdated, a little lagging compared to what they experience in Europe. So from that moment on, it's not a problem when he coach our national league players, our Liga Satu players. He can bring them up, bring them up a level or two. But when he started to take on the European based players, I think the dynamic will be different, and this is a calculated risk that Eric willing to take. And the gamble is whether we go to America, Mexico, Canada, or not.
Mm. I'll come on to talking about some of those points in a moment. I'll come to you, Michael. First, you mentioned that you were in Jakarta in November. You were there a few times last year as well. You were there for the Japan and Saudi games. I think you took off just before the Saudi game in fact. But you mentioned at the top during the introduction that it wasn't a surprise in some ways, but was in another. So did you get any sense in the time that you were there that there were underlying issues between perhaps Shin and the PSSI or Shin and the players that would lead to a decision like this?
I think exactly as Firzie said, we had a long chat actually one evening standing outside training, a couple of nights before the Saudi Arabia game, and it's funny, the conversation that we had that evening was along the lines of, if they lose against Saudi Arabia, and especially if they lose heavily against Saudi Arabia, Shin is definitely out of a job, because the dynamics have altered so much within the squad that he is very much seen as uh, a coach who struggles to communicate with the majority of his key players because of all of the issues that Firzie has just mentioned. But of course, he goes on and they win that game 2-0, so it buys him a reprieve of sorts. A remarkable result, a great performance, arguably the greatest performance Indonesia's national team has ever put in, certainly in World Cup qualifying. But look, I noticed I was there for the Japan game. I was in Jakarta also in June for the game against the Philippines when they secured their place in the third round of Asia's qualifiers. And the one thing that was very noticeable in and around both of those games was the communication issue was clearly becoming more and more of a sticking point. You go into press conferences, and as Firzie says, you have two translators sitting up there with Coach Shin. You have one who's translating everything into Bahasa Indonesia, and then you have somebody who's translating into English. Then, if a player comes in, a player will do a press conference, and the whole press conference will only be in English. Even though it's a Dutch, Netherlands-born Dutch-speaking player, he'll do it all in English. Someone like a Tom Hay, someone like that, and so you end up with this mishmash. It's all the possibility for messages to be confused, for things to not be clear and coherent because of all that. It was abundantly clear even at that point, even back in June, and that just has amplified further with more and more of these Europe-born players coming into the squad. Many of whom I'm not sure for certain, but I'm sure Firzie can confirm. Most of them won't speak much, if any, Bahasa Indonesia. They will speak Dutch and they will speak English. They might speak other languages, Italian, Spanish, whatever, depending on which clubs they're playing for. But their main language to communicate with the coach will be English. And as Firzie says, I've known Shin for a long time. I've dealt with Shin Tae-yong ever since his playing days. The very first tournament I went to watch whenever I came to Asia to cover football in Asia was in November 1995. I saw Ilwachunma playing in Bandung in Indonesia in the old Asian Club Championship, and Shin Tae-yong was in the centre of the midfield for Ilwachunma in that tournament. So I've been watching him and in and around him for 29 years. I've interviewed him one-on-one 2 or 3 times. His English is broken at very, very best. If he sees you by the pitch side, he'll say hello. You'll get a couple of words, but he really doesn't speak much English. I know he's been there for 5 years. One of the criticisms that was also made of him was he hasn't learned anywhere near enough Bahasa Indonesia to be able to communicate with the players and with the media, and that was also a criticism of him, which was fair, bearing in mind the amount of time that he was there. And I think it's not one of the harder languages in the world to learn. I don't think. I think it's a relatively straightforward language to certainly be able to get the grips of the basics. And he didn't do that in his time there really. So he's been slightly the architect of his own downfall, I think. Um, Also, I think as Firzie says, the other issue is tactically he's certainly not at the level of you know. The coaches that many of these players who are playing in Europe would be working under on a day-to-day basis. So there was something of an inevitability about it. But at the same time, doing it at this stage, they're sitting on 6 points from 6 games. They're third in the group. They're 1 point off Australia behind, and outside of those automatic qualification places for 2026. There's 4 games to go. There's only what 2.5 months until the next game against Australia. It's a big gamble. It's a big risk to make a decision like that, to bring it, especially if the plan is to bring in a coach who's never worked in this part of the world before, or who has limited knowledge of this part of the world, doesn't really know the players, certainly doesn't know the opposition particularly well that the team will be playing against, and to parachute somebody in that time frame with those demands and with those requirements, it's a mighty gamble.
We'll get on to talking about his replacement in a little while, because before we started recording, news broke of who that is going to be, although it's been an open secret all day, so I don't think it'll come as any surprise. Firstly, just back to you, caught wind of this news sort of towards the tail end of last week, and we were sort of having discussions across the weekend, and it just ramped up over that time. And in some of the stuff that we were discussing, is it as simple as the fact that he'd lost the dressing room? Had he lost the dressing room and the confidence of the European players? Because as you look at the side, and 3/4 of it, if not more, are the European-based players. And as you said, every window there's more and more of those players being added to the squad. I can almost easily see a time now where pretty much all of the squad is going to be the European heritage players, aside from Marcelino and perhaps a few others. Had he lost the dressing room? Is it as simple as that?
I think not all, because when you see all the farewell messages that the players gave to him in social media after the announcement, they are very true, and a lot of them they attributed their success in club football and national team also to Coach Shin. I think with half the squad, they are truly grateful for him to elevate their game. But we know especially from the Bahrain and the China game, there is a big dynamic over there. There's a big dynamic at Bahrain. There's a big dynamic at China that persuade Erick and the PSSI leadership to make this brave call, because what happened in Bahrain and what happened in China surely made PSSI very uncomfortable for Shin to continue in his position to lead us in this very precarious situation, because the upper ups in the PSSI told me we cannot afford to have another Bahrain situation. We cannot afford to have another China situation with the players. If you want to say he lost the dressing room, I won't say that's the case, but I would say that a few players also came in about themselves to gather, because there's this big team meeting after the Japan game where the players sit all together in a room without Coach Shin or without the training staff, and they come together. They put their all of their things in one direction for the betterment of the Indonesian national team. And we spoke to Verdong at the mix zone after the game, after the Saudi game, and he said that moment really makes the players together as one to achieve the goal of sending Indonesia to the World Cup. I think with the players is the dynamic is okay, but between some of the players and the coach, the dynamic made it so Eric needs to step in and implement his own guy at the helm. But on the other hand, Eric is also known in his businesses in Indonesia also that he preferred to have his own people in every line of business that he held, be it in the media or in other industries, because we know that Shin Tae-yong came in under the previous PSSI leadership under Iwan Bule. So uh, it is very normal for Eric to want his own man to lead Indonesia to glory.
Firzie, I've got a couple of questions for you just in relation to all of this. The first one is obviously Shin's been dismissed as of today or whenever the decision was made over the weekend and obviously announced this afternoon. But much was made about 6 months ago that he had signed a contract extension through to 2027. What impact, if any, did that situation have on the decision making from the PSSI with regards to cancelling the contract? Has his contract been paid out? Do we know any of the terms and conditions of the severance?
Yeah, okay. With his renewal, I think it is inevitable for PSSI to renew his contract because when his contract are up nearing in the first half of this year, I think with all the achievements in the national team that Shin has bring to us, as Paul said, I think there's no other way for PSSI other than extend his contract. Even though I know from that moment there are some voices of discontent about Shin and about his obligations to the federation, but the only way for the federation to do, and the only way for Eric to retain his popularity among the Indonesian public, because at that time he was running also for the vice presidency seat, which he ultimately lost. I think at that moment in time, there's no other way for him other than extend his contract. But now, yeah, this I talked to a few higher ups in the PSSI also. They are now managing the settlement agreement for the rest of his contract, but I got the info that it's not gonna be full because the PSSI said that Shin also he did not fully what you say it fully adhere to his contract, yeah, to his some of his obligations in the contract. I know for a fact that one of his obligations in the contract was also to learn the Indonesian language after he signed that new contract. But 6 months after he signed that new contract, there's still no improvement whatsoever, other than he says "selamat pagi" whatsoever, "selamat siang." But yeah, other than that, there's also a few things regarding terms in his contract that Shin, I am led to believe that he's not following through with his agreement in the PSSI. So there's a lot of this, Michael and Paul, that is something that's going on in the background. It's not necessarily just the result in the of the national team in the field, but there's also some kind of dynamics because Eric also always used the word dynamic in describing the relationship between the federation and Shin, because he's not someone who is easy to dealing with. Yeah, Michael, you must know him better than most of us here, how stubborn and how, yeah, Shin is just being Shin, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. And in terms, you just mentioned certainly when the team qualified for the third round of qualifying for the World Cup, Shin's popularity probably was at an all-time high in Indonesia. Obviously, off the back of what had happened at the Asian Cup, qualifying for the Asian Cup and the performance there, then the near miss with the Olympic Games, then the qualification for the third round. So he was enormously popular, arguably the most popular person in all of Indonesia at that period of time. How has that changed, if at all, in the last 6 months, and what's been the reaction amongst the fan base to this decision today?
Yeah, I think you just need to scroll down to social media to know that how much of an unpopular decision this is. Eric is taking a huge gamble, not just not just because of the performance of the national team, not just of our place in the World Cup, but also his popularity among Indonesian fans. This is a gamble I think that he cannot lose, because if he want to go back again in politics, I think he needs to prove that decision is the right one. And I think the time will tell, because uh, every football fans in social media that I know, even La Grande Indonesia, one of the biggest supporter group in Indonesia, who has their own tribune in the stadium, they released major talking points about why the federation should not sack Shin. That's the level of support that he has right now. Even after we lost to the Philippines in the Asian Cup, when we lost in Surakarta, I was there also. Even when we played that badly, even when we played so poorly, after the final whistle, the crowd still chants Shin Tae-yong's name. And it happens every time, every match that I went to in the Indonesian national team, whenever he's in the helmet. And I never seen a national team coach as popular as Shin Tae-yong.
Let's talk about his replacement now. We've sort of touched upon it a little bit, because I think that's the other interesting aspect of this. It's one thing to dismiss Shin Tae-yong, but then you've got to get the next appointment right, especially to sort of to win over the fans and to show that the decision was justified. Because if we sort of play devil's advocate, because I think most people agree it's probably harsh on Shin given his success, but if you play devil's advocate, we have spoken about some of the issues. He was far from perfect given the success that he had. Those two matches in particular against Bahrain and China, but there've been others where tactically they have lacked significantly, and it has cost them in this qualifying round. Those two games against Bahrain and China, they arguably should have taken 6 points, and they took one, which could have a significant impact on their qualification hopes. And they got exposed at the back on a number of occasions. So you could make a sound argument to replace him with a more tactically astute manager. Now, as I said, just before we started recording, the sort of official word broke as to who it's going to be. Fabrizio Romano announced that it is going to be the former Dutch international Patrick Kluivert who will take over, as he's reporting on an initial 2-year deal with another 2-year option. First of all, I'll just get your initial reactions to that. I'll come to you, Firzie, and then I'll come to you, Michael. Your initial reaction when you heard the name Patrick Kluivert.
I know. I know the federation has been contacting the KNVB, the Netherlands FA, for a few while now. I know they are looking for Dutch-born coaches, so that it makes sense with the squad that we have now. The most logical option regarding that is maybe Giovanni von Bronckhorst, because he has the Indonesian roots and he has that experience of managing in high level. I'm sure Eric has already sounded the idea, but maybe one reason or the other it cannot come to pass. The other name that was mentioned before Patrick was also Fred Rutten, the former PSV coach. I think he's not that stellar name, but he got that he got that experience that maybe Indonesia needed. He's 62 years old. Patrick Kluivert is now 48, I think, with no prior managerial experience in the top flight. I think he managed Curacao for temporarily, and Paul, you said that he was the assistant manager in Brisbane also. Yeah, if we can call it out of the blue, yeah, that's a name coming out of the blue, I think.
Michael, what was your reaction when you first saw that name?
Interesting. I mean, I think it's it wouldn't have been my first choice. Let's put it that way. I was really very surprised that someone with a lack of a coaching track record, as is the case with Kluivert, has been approached by a nation that is basically 4 games away from qualifying for the World Cup, and to bring in a coach who, will have limited knowledge of the regional game, will have limited knowledge of the Indonesian game, will have some knowledge of the players within the squad, no doubt, bearing in mind the connections and everything else that this squad has with European football. But it still surprised me. I would have thought, exactly as Firzie said, someone like a Giovanni van Bronckhorst who has worked at the top end of European club football, also has those connections with Indonesia, would have made much more sense. And perhaps there were reasons that didn't happen. Who knows? But Kluivert was a phenomenal player, and certainly in terms of experience, he did everything in the club game. Um, you know, you know, during his time as a professional, he was really an exceptional footballer, and there will certainly be players within that squad who can learn a lot from him. And certainly one of the areas where Indonesia has struggled has been scoring goals and a lack of prowess up front. So if he can bring something to the team that allows them to be able to score more freely or to be able to convert the chances that they create, then fantastic. He'd be a great appointment. But certainly, my initial thoughts would be he's untried, he's untested, and it was already a gamble getting rid of Shin, with someone who has been as successful as he has been, and with the relationship that he has with the players and the knowledge he has of both the Indonesian game and the regional game, to then back that gamble up by going with somebody who is untested in international football as a coach just amplifies the risk level considerably. So let's see.
Mm. I think the fact that both you and Firzie almost had the similar reaction when I asked that question probably says a lot about this appointment. It's going to raise a lot of eyebrows for the very points that you raised there, Michael. His lack of international experience, his lack of connection, if you want to put it that way, to football in this part of the world, and understanding, because you're going to need a coach. We saw, Saudi Arabia, when they decided to sack Mancini, brought Renard back because it's effectively plug and play. Someone who understands the team, understands the region, can just come straight in and doesn't have to have that period of acclimatization that Patrick is going to have. He's going to have to get acclimatized to football in Indonesia. He's going to have to get acclimatized to the players. He may know some of the Dutch players, but there is still a sprinkling of local players that are in this side. He's going to have to get acclimatized to that. Is he going to be based in Europe where most of the players are? Is he going to be based in Jakarta? And he's a big name, but it's going to open themselves up to questions as to whether they've gone for style over substance and have gone for the name over the coaching record. So has there been any chatter yet? I know it's only just broken in the last little bit, but as I said, it was kind of an open secret for the last 24 to 36 hours, Firzie. Any kind of mention as perhaps who his assistant coaches might be? I saw a mention before that there was a rumor that it was going to be an experienced assistant coach to come in, which would make sense. Is there any indication yet as to who he might bring into his staff to at least give some more confidence that this is a step in the right direction?
Yeah, and I don't have the information on that currently, because when the announcement was made, I think the announcement actually will be made a week from now officially. Eric said that Patrick will arrive at the 11th. It's a Saturday, 11th of January night, and then the press conference will be on the 12th afternoon. I think it's about 4 p.m. I think then we will get more understanding of the composition of his coaching staff. But the thing with Shin is he employs Nova Arianto, one of our top manager, top coaches, top young coaches actually, as a member of the coaching staff, to have that connection, not just for the players but also for the fans, knowing that one of our best coaches is on the dugout with Coach Shin. I really hope that Patrick will also do the same. Patrick will also embrace the Indonesian coaching atmosphere coaching people, because with just the time that he has, I don't think he can fully scout all the players that we have, because we have players spread across more than 10 countries in 16 overseas club, I think, with half of them playing in Indonesia, which is in itself a very big country. So I think he needs to do things fast as possible and work as hard as possible, because the odds are against him. This is very definitely so, because not just against the level opposition that he'll go up against, but because the expectations of the public, Indonesian public. You two have already known how football crazy the Indonesian public is. I don't really think Patrick will know, but he will certainly know in his second game against Bahrain. So a lot of this hangs on to his ability to adapt to this situation and adapt to the very high expectations of the Indonesian public.
If he doesn't know, he's very quickly going to find out about how passionate the Indonesian fans are. If he has social media, he's probably already found out, given that it's only been half an hour. But that's all that the social media fans in Indonesia need to take to make their point known. That's where we will finish up for today. We could probably talk for a lot longer, but for an emergency pod to dissect it all, we'll just leave it there for today. So, Michael, Firzie, thank you very much for joining us at short notice. It's as I said, only 6 days into the new year, but it's already off to a bang. So, Firzie, thank you very much. I know you're a very, very busy man today, writing stories and getting all the inside information. So, I really appreciate you joining us.
No problem, guys. Thank you, mate.
Thank you too, Michael. At short notice to jump on, very much appreciated. As I said, the new year is off to a bang,
isn't it? Just and there's going to be an awful lot more excitement over the next few months once Champions League gets back up and running and World Cup qualifying back up in March. Can't wait. It's going to be good.
Never a dull moment. And now that we've dusted off the cobwebs for the first episode of 2025, we will be back to some sort of regular scheduling. So we will be back with another episode shortly, because we haven't even got into what's happening in Malaysia with their national team program and everything that's going on there, with TMJ taking over and Pete Klimowski, the Australian, taking charge with Mark Milligan as well. So we'll dedicate some time in our next episode to that one as well, because it's a lot to get into there. So before then, though, don't forget to follow us on all our social media channels to keep across the latest breaking news from across Asia, and rate and review the show wherever you get your podcast to help the show grow and, more importantly, help spread the word of Asian football. As I said, we'll be back again shortly with another episode. But until then, it's bye for now.